Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as usual, is your other co-host, John. John, how are you doing on the tail end, or I guess the beginning of the new week after this big holiday weekend that we just had?
I'm doing good, man. Just a little tired, just traveling a lot. I'm in Buffalo, New York right now in another hotel for a couple days off, which is good, but hung up some lights just because every hotel is pretty much all the same and it gets a little depressing and sterile. And so, since I don't get to be home much over the holidays, I bring a little bit of the holiday spirit with me, so.
Love that. Festive. It's time to get in. It's just, it's December. It's time to be into the holidays.
Yeah,
Once
man,
you're past Thanksgiving, I'm all in on Christmas. That's how I feel about it.
same, dude. That's where I'm at. It's good. There was they got a bunch of snow up here a couple days ago, so that's nice too. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, we got a little bit too.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it feels better when there's some snow this time of year. And so
yeah.
I love it. I love it when we get into the northern parts of the regions of the country and we get to experience that, because it's not enough anymore, in my opinion, but that's all right.
Yeah, either it's beautiful covered in snow or it's brown and looks like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. So I'm going to go with snow covered every time.
Absolutely.
That's not a tough decision for me at all. I don't understand anyone who disagrees. I don't get it.
I don't either. I'm not sure, but
it's going to be cold anyway.
Might as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, man, but that's it. Not much else is going on here. Just same old working. That's it. What about you?
Oh man, it's good. Had an awesome holiday weekend. Excited to talk about ate an obscene amount on Thanksgiving and really over the whole holiday weekend. I really went hard and celebrated. And there was a lot to celebrate, as we're going to talk about soon.
Yes.
As we review these Big Ten games.
Sorry. Yes.
But before we do that, we should get into some Big Ten news. We've had some movement jobs-wise. And the Purdue Boilermakers, fresh off a 66-0 beating at the hands of their rival Indiana Hoosiers, fired head coach Ryan Walters after just 2 years at the helm. Reportedly, at least the gossip I'm seeing, and maybe this is just Indiana fans wishful thinking, message board stuff, but at least some people I'm seeing are reporting that Purdue, and we've actually speculated that Purdue did not want to get rid of Ryan Walters. And they were hoping that it would be like, not that they'd win, not that they'd even be that close, but that they would show that they were like a competitive football team.
Yeah.
Enough to justify saying, hey, this guy's only had 2 years, give him until year 3 to see if he can make his, if he can fulfill his vision here. Well, he's not getting year 3.
No.
They pulled the plug. Ryan Walters finishes, he was 3-9 last year and finishes 1-11 this season. So that's pretty rough. I would argue that he was set up to fail from the beginning. Yeah. I think it was always a weird idea for Purdue, a school that has only ever been successful with offensive innovators as coaches, to suddenly, going back generations, that's been true of Purdue, and to try to hire a defensive coordinator who had never been a head coach before. I feel like they were kind of setting him up to fail. And then, the fact that, frankly, Purdue has plenty of NIL for basketball, but they just don't for football. And because of that, they lost their 2 best players after last year. And we look in the transfer portal right now, and the latest Karlaftis is in the transfer portal. And I think I saw somebody else maybe going in too, but I forget. I'm not sure about, is Thieneman? Is he going in or no?
I haven't seen anything yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think I asked about that last week, about whether or not
you did,
what your thoughts were. But I mean, man, it would take a lot to keep him there. He's a really talented guy, and I'm sure he would be appreciated in a lot of places. So
yeah, I mean, Purdue needs to make a hire, and they need to make it pretty quick. And then they need to try to recruit these guys, and they need to try to re-recruit Karlaftis and try to convince him to get out of the portal and come back. Because you just, when you're already one of the least talented teams in the league, you can't just be bleeding your most talented players every year.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, I sympathize because I am a Minnesota Golden Gopher basketball fan. And we've got NIL for football, which I'm grateful for because football is my favorite sport. But we do not have NIL for basketball, not to the point we need to. And 3 of the 6 best players in the Gopher basketball team walked out the door for the cash. And like on a basketball team, you can't replace that. It's just not going to happen, you know? And now they're just really bad. So Purdue, I think, is having that problem in football. They just don't have the NIL right now to compete. And so when you're trying to sell this job to somebody, like part of what Indiana sold Curt Cignetti on after all this failure is that they were going to invest in a big way. And, you know, they invested in his contract. They invested in the assistant coaching pool. They've gotten some NIL money, you know, et cetera. Like Purdue feels like they need to sell a coach on like, hey, we're going to actually try to compete now. But are they going to try to compete? Or are they just going to hire another coach and then in 3 to 4 years, or maybe 2, we're going to be back here having this same conversation about somebody else?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially like such a fall with like Jeff Brom and having them, you know, at the Big Ten championship game. Like what was that? What, 3 years ago? 4?
Yeah, it was. I
Yeah.
do remind people though, as good of a year as that was for Purdue, they still ended that year 8-6. So it's not like he was lighting the world on fire at any point, but he was winning on a regular basis, going to bowl games, winning 6, 7, 8 games.
Well, and they were always dangerous, no matter what. Like whenever you played Purdue, they were always dangerous because Jeff Brom was he could scheme well enough against you that he was always a threat to beat you. So
he always had 3 to 4 trick plays that you knew were coming, but you still weren't ready for anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and he just ran those. Like PJ Fleck said, other people have trick plays. Jeff Brom, that's just like base plays in their offense. Like, oh yeah, it's the double reverse flea flicker again. They run it every week. Like they're super good at it because they run it all the time. You know?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, every once in a while they get a 20-yard loss, but most of the time they get a 30-yard gain. You know, and I do think that's what you need at Purdue as an offensive innovator. I just don't know. So look, it's enough money that someone will take the job and they'll be like, whoo, money bag, set for life.
Yeah.
But is anyone going to take the job thinking they can succeed, knowing that even if you recruit and develop some guys, your best players are probably walking out the door after their freshman or sophomore years? That's hard. That's really hard.
You know who could do that job? Curt Cignetti.
That's cold. That's cold.
Saying, if anyone could pull that program around, it's Curt Cignetti. That's the guy.
Oh,
man. You just did it this year. Why not? He loves a challenge. Just go, you know, hop, skip, and a jump away, man. You got another challenge waiting for you right there, buddy. You don't even really have to move. You probably stay in your house.
It's ridiculous, John. You're gonna anger our whole Hoosier fan base.
I forgot we're basically a Hoosier podcast, so my bad. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
But yeah, so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on where Purdue goes for here, hire wise?
Honestly, I don't right now. I have no idea as far as what, especially regarding the fact that because I agree with you that you need an offensive innovator. You need someone who's creative. You need someone who is willing to throw the ball all over the place because that's just what they do. That's what they've always done, and they've always done it very well. And I think that at this time, I can't think of anyone who's available that would want to take that job. Maybe there's somebody, I guess, in like the G5 that I'm just not aware of at this time that might be willing to do something like that, because it is, as we've made the point before many times in the podcast, any head coaching job in the Big Ten is a good job. It's just the way it is now. You know, there's different levels to it within the conference itself, but the job, no matter where it is a good job because you're in the Big Ten. So
Yeah.
that's going to be desirable for anyone.
I mean,
or most people.
I don't know if Purdue can get them, but I would be going to John Summerall at Tulane and making him say no.
Sure.
I'd be going to Barry Odom at UNLV.
Yeah.
UNLV is not a winning. They're a hoop school more than historically than they ever were a football school.
Yeah.
So what he's accomplishing there, like I don't know. I'd be looking at guys like that who've won a ton at the group of 5 level, because I think at Purdue, you need a Cignetti, because you need a guy who can transfer and bring like a dozen people with him.
That's
players.
a good point. Yeah.
Like who can start 10 to maybe 15 guys who can come right in and start on one side of the ball or another. Right.
Yep.
And, Cignetti, I think, had 13 from James Madison.
Yeah. Some
come in and
like
do that.
Yeah.
Plus he got Curtis Rourke, plus he got whatever, But like, I think that if you're Purdue, you need to be trying to do that and trying to bring in someone who can, but then you need to pony up the NIL money to get those guys to come, because otherwise, why wouldn't they go somewhere else?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just not entirely sure what the situation with the NIL there is, other than that I know it's not that great. It's some universities are obviously much more transparent, and you kind of know and understand where they're coming from, whether it's a program like what Minnesota has with, Dinkytown athletes, or if you're, basically supported by Nike at Oregon, or Mark Cuban, at Indiana, all this kind of stuff, like where you have these massive donors. I just, like you said, other than basketball, I'm not sure how much they want to commit to that. And they've never been a very serious, I shouldn't say never, but it's been a long time since they've been a very serious football school.
Joe Tiller.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
Joe Tiller was running an offense that was so far ahead of everybody. He was like, everybody was living in the Stone Age, and he was in like an electric vehicle. You know what I mean? Like he was so far out in front of the curve. And so he was able to do things that you couldn't normally do at Purdue. But you can't depend on the idea that you're going to be schematically better than everybody else in the Big Ten.
No.
You want to be better than a lot of people. You want to be competitive, but you're not going to you can't bank on the fact, say, we're going to have the best coaches in the Big Ten. It's not going to happen. Not unless you're going to pay $1 bajillion for those coaches. But you can have. Okay, go on.
Oh no, go ahead. By all means.
No.
No, I was just gonna say, I just to kind of finish. I think that how we said, I think a week or two, or even 2 weeks ago, about how this is the right decision. I think this is the right choice. I think you have to cut bait and run right now, and like you said, make a hire as soon as possible. Because you can't afford it these days to flounder for 2 years or 3, I should say. And clearly something's not working. I would be very curious to see where Ryan Walters ends up. I
bet he goes back to being a defensive coordinator, don't you think?
I'm sure. I'm just curious where he goes, if he's back in like a power 2 position, or if he, goes somewhere else, or maybe he does want a head coach, or maybe he'll, find.
Yeah, maybe he'll end up in a group of 5 school as a head coach. Yeah. That could happen too. Yeah.
Interesting. So, but I feel for the guy. I he clearly is really good at one thing. Well, actually, I'm not sure about that anymore, but considering Purdue's defense was not great the last 2 years.
I don't know, man. I'm not sure. Or was he riding Bielema's coattails a little bit?
That's what I'm wondering. I'm not sure.
It's hard to say. Did he get lucky? He recruited a few guys who were better than they were supposed to be, and that covered up the fact that he wasn't a great coach. I don't know. Yeah. But maybe he's awesome. We'll see. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see what his next job is. I'm sure he'll get a really good job. He'll deserve it, Yeah. And as a defensive coordinator or as a group of 5 head coach. And it'll be interesting to see what lessons he learns from Purdue going forward, wherever he ends up next.
Yep.
And Purdue, of course, will be curious to see what, who they decide to turn to try to get this thing turned around.
Yeah, and we'll keep track of all that and make sure we report it whenever we find it and hear about it. So, but we got a couple other things, some big moves going on, just southwest of Minnesota, I think, of Dinkytown. Interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, do you want to announce? We had some movement at Nebraska.
We did, yes. And again, I apologize. I have to record from my bed because I go over to the desk and all of a sudden the internet cuts out. So I apologize, everybody, whoever's watching. It's awkward. It sucks. I'm not a fan. But here we are. Yeah, so
We're making it work, people. We're making it work.
So Nebraska, after finally reaching bowl eligibility, which congratulations, Husker fans. I know you've been wanting this for a long time.
Yes.
Both
Congratulations.
Mike and I said you would make it to a bowl this year. So there you go. Enjoy it. And, you know, it is exciting. And no matter what, don't listen to anyone who tells you, because they've obviously told Minnesota fans this a long time. Whenever you go to a bowl game and you think it's meaningless, it's not meaningless. It actually, in my opinion, it means a lot, and not just as far as like who you're playing on the field, even the bowl itself. Those extra practices really matter. It helps recruiting.
15 extra practices. That's what you get. You get 15 for spring ball, you get 15 for fall camp, and you get 15 for bowl practice, and that's it. That's it. Outside of the season, that's all you get. So making a bowl game and getting those 15 extra practices is huge for developing younger players and guys who haven't gotten a lot of time because they're playing behind other guys.
Exactly. So don't listen to the haters. It's all good. It's a really good thing in so many more ways than just, showing up on that field that day and playing that game. But what's going on though is not such great news. Unfortunately, the hits just keep coming from in Lincoln, Nebraska, and defensive coordinator who has been outstanding the last 2 years at Nebraska, Tony White, is leaving for Florida State, and he is taking with him defensive line coach Terrance Knighton. So, as we've seen this year, especially, that defensive line has been spectacular. You have guys
Incredible.
like Nosh Hotmacher and who is just a game wrecker. And now you're taking away, two coaches that are very, very, very effective and have made this Nebraska team more competitive, and hence why I think they made a bowl game this year, period. Because as much as I think, their offense was better this year than last year, it was by no means leaps and bounds better.
Still a defensive team.
It was very much a defensive team, and that defense definitely kept them in games and won them games for the most part. It sucks, Now you and I have talked about this prior to the pod, and I agree with you. I think that Matt Rule is going to be able to bring somebody in, and I'm not too worried about them finding like a decent defensive coordinator, but it's always a gamble, man. It's just what programs like Nebraska, which are much more like Minnesota than they probably want to admit, but it's the truth, is you're now a developmental program. That's what you are. You're not Ohio State. You're not recruiting on that level like you maybe did in the 90s. It's just not that way anymore. So you need development, and with developmental programs, you need consistency. And losing coordinators, which happens a lot anyways, a lot of places. It happened in Minnesota last year, obviously. It's a gamble. Sometimes it works out really well, which I think, Corey Heatherman at Minnesota worked out very well. I'm really excited to see what we can build off with that. But sometimes, obviously, it can hurt you in a lot of ways too. But I think Matt Rule is going to make a good hire. I have confidence in him. I think he's going to do a good job and find somebody there. So, not too worried about it, but we'll see.
Yeah, Matt Rule's consistently had good defenses. I think Matt Rule will find someone competent to run that defense.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if we are going to talk about, so that's all we'll say. We'll talk about Nebraska when we get to the Nebraska game. Sure. But that's all I'll say for now. But yeah, I think Matt Rule will make a good hire, but it'll be interesting to see. It'll be different, and it'll be interesting to see if any of those players, especially the D line, follow Knighton and White to Florida State. I'm kind of surprised because I expected Tony White, when he left, I thought he would only leave to be a head coach. I'm shocked he's leaving to a lateral move, to be honest with you.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. What did you say? What was
that's fine. I said I'm surprised that they lost Tony White to a lateral move and not to a head coaching position.
Yeah, It's interesting, but I guess that's how we felt about Joe Rossi too.
Yes, it's true.
I think you and I both thought he was going to become a head coach next, but he made a lateral move to Michigan State, and
Yeah,
that's just the way it is these days, I guess. Money talks, man. I know
it
Florida
happens. It
State
happens
has a lot
to. The point is, it happens to everybody just about.
It
at
does.
This point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
from what I've heard, Florida State's got some major private donors and all that kind of stuff. So who knows what kind of money they were offered to come down there and fix Florida State, because they need a lot of fixing.
They do.
We'll see.
They certainly do. 2-10. 2-10.
Yep.
Fresh off a rivalry loss to Florida in convincing fashion.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of, is there anything else we need to discuss, or should we get into reviewing these games?
Yes, as always, if you want to find We Live for Saturday, you can find us here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. And you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com.
So you might notice the way I'm dressed. And John, I'm still feeling pretty good about something that happened, a couple days ago now.
Yeah.
On Friday.
Yep.
And that's the first game we have to discuss here. We had the 7-5 Minnesota Golden Gophers 24, the 5-7 Wisconsin Badgers 7. The offenses were both a little slow to get going in this one. First 4 possessions all ended in punts, and only one lasted longer than 3 plays. But what got the Gophers going in this game was explosive plays. On their first touchdown drive, they started out with 2 consecutive plays for first downs, a run and a pass. Then on 2nd and 5, Brosmer throws an absolutely perfect outside shoulder, fade to Daniel Jackson, who does a great job catching the ball and then fights for several more yards like a rock star that he is. That play covered 37 yards, gave Minnesota offense the jolt they needed. They scored their first TD on a QB sneak where 3 backs lined up behind Brosmer, and they all push him forward as he dives into the end zone. That became relevant because Minnesota got another stop. And then when they got the ball back, Minnesota offensive coordinator Greg Harbaugh made the call of the game. It was 3rd and 1 in Minnesota territory. The Gophers lined up in that tush-push QB sneak formation with the 2 tight ends and 3 backs lined up behind center. Watching it, you're thinking this is a QB sneak for sure. Or maybe they're going to fake it like against Illinois and run the passing play to the wide side of the field. But instead, Minnesota didn't do either of those things. And instead of running forward for the sneak, QB Max Brosmer handed it off to running back Marcus Major, who was lined up as one of the backs behind Brosmer. They had another up back and tight end Frank Bierman lead block outside. Bierman laid a block. Major put a foot in the ground, made one strong cut, and exploded for 40 yards before he was run out of bounds at the Wisconsin 26.
He was so close to housing it, dude.
So close to housing that.
Yes.
And I mean, one thing Major is, he's got speed.
Yeah.
He's got real speed. And I want to add that they also ran a wide receiver jet sweep on that drive with Daniel Jackson and only went for 5 yards. But the point is, Harbaugh was going into his bag. And it was working. When he needed his playmakers to make plays, he got the ball to wide receivers Elijah Spencer and Daniel Jackson, and running backs Darius Taylor and the aforementioned Marcus Major. But man, the real story of this day was this Minnesota defense. They were aggressive and relentless all day. These are all of Wisconsin's possessions for the entire game. Punt, 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 end of half. Punt, touchdown, missed field goal, punt, turnover on downs, end of game. Wisconsin punted the ball 8 times, a season high. They scored just once. Wisconsin had 44 yards from scrimmage in the entire first half. The Badgers managed just 167 yards for the whole game. Wisconsin ran the ball 23 times for just 37 yards. That is insane futility. That's about 1.5 yards per rush. That is not going to win a lot of football games. By contrast, Minnesota had more rushing yards than Wisconsin had total yards with 183. They also had nearly 200 yards passing as well. The Gophers did. Senior Minnesota QB Max Brosmer had a senior kind of game, going 17 for 26 for 191 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 3 total TDs, 2 passing and 1 rushing, and 0 picks. Those are really solid numbers. And the truth is, there were a few drops in there as well.
Yeah.
He could have easily been like 20 for 26 for 250 plus yards. That said, a really solid day from the senior signal caller.
Mm-hmm.
Star Gopher running back Darius Taylor was worth the price of admission by himself. He ended with 32 carries for 143 yards, a 4.45 yards per rush average. Also had 2 catches for 13 yards. Darius kept the chains moving all day long, did a great job. Backup running back Marcus Major had just 2 carries, man, but that one went for 40 yards, and that was ridiculous. Wide receiver Elijah Spencer had 5 catches for 75 yards, and star wide receiver Daniel Jackson in his last regular season game as a Gopher had 6 grabs for 61 yards and a touchdown. Jackson also had that run I mentioned earlier. And then tight end Jamison Gears, man, had an impressive leaping 15-yard touchdown catch. He's gotten a lot better as the year has progressed.
He really has, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with his ability to catch the ball now these days.
Yeah, no, I agree. On defense, it truly was a team effort as everybody chipped in and did their part. Shout out to cornerback Justin Wally, who had 4 tackles, a sack, and a pass defended, and safety Coy Parrish, who had 8 tackles and a pass defended. This secondary shut down Wisconsin's receivers pretty much all day. For Wisconsin, QB Braden Locke was just 15 for 32 for 130 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks for a QBR of just 32.6. Locke threw several turnover-worthy balls that the Gophers' normally ball-hawking secondary just couldn't grab for whatever reason.
It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what was up with that. But I guess it was cold, but, catch the ball. Still, it was a miserable performance for Locke, and my guess is, and my prediction is, this is the last we see of him in a Badger uniform.
Yeah.
Starting running back Tawi Walker managed just 36 yards on 14 carries for 2.6 yards per rush. What an absolutely abysmal outing from him. And Wisconsin's receivers didn't do much except for Tretch Kekauna, who had 6 grabs for 64 yards, and Vinny Anthony caught the Badgers' only TD. So, John, what did you think about this edition of the Battle for Paul Bunyan's Axe?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the outcome. I had a good time. And here's the point I'm going to make, though. This could have easily been 55-0.
So easily. This was so close. It was a beating, but this was so close to getting out of hand. Yeah,
it should have been. Yeah, we're talking about missed opportunities and turnovers. If we would have come down with those absolutely would have turned into touchdowns. With how poorly Wisconsin was playing. And the only reason Wisconsin even got a touchdown is it was handed to them due to Joey Gerlach.
It was that was an inexcusable late hit. He was 4 yards out of bounds.
It was so stupid. What was it, 4th and 15 or something?
It was going to be 4th and 15, yeah.
It was going to be 4, yeah. So, yeah, essentially handed that touchdown, but hey, you know what?
But Fleck also tried to kick a 50-yard field goal on 4th and 5 into the wind, even though his offense was rolling.
That's also true.
I'm like, PJ, throw the ball.
It doesn't. We can't.
What are you doing?
We can't have a Gopher win without PJ trying to find a way to lose it. I feel like at least once or twice, it has to happen.
Dude, it's into the wind. You're just setting up Dragon to fail. I don't know what he was doing. That gave them great field position. It was, I don't know. It was stupid.
It was dumb.
Get in the gun. Let your senior quarterback check into the right play. You throw the easy 5-yard pass. You move on.
Yep. That's the bad
score a
stuff.
Touchdown. We were close. Yeah.
Exactly. So I got to just get that out of the way because obviously that was very frustrating It was still a beating. It was absolutely a beating. Statistically, you look at
beatdown.
it, it was absolutely humiliating. I mean, this is a Wisconsin team or a program that obviously, as you and I have talked about many, many times before, really relies on like a solid offensive and defensive line and like great running backs and like a serviceable quarterback. And they have none of that right now.
None of those
Like
things.
not a single thing.
Yeah.
Not a good quarterback.
No.
Not a solid running back. Tawee Walker is serviceable at times, but not consistent.
Tawee Walker is a backup running back at Wisconsin. For what Wisconsin is supposed to be on the ground, Tawee Walker is a perfectly serviceable second running back. But he's not your go-to guy.
No. He would probably be third on the depth chart from what we're used to seeing in more often than not in years past. So, so it's crazy to see that happen, obviously, with a program like Wisconsin, which you and I have grown up seeing, pretty much beat down Minnesota. But things are changing. Things are changing in Minnesota.
I was going to say, John, that's not recently, not the last 8 years.
Well, I shouldn't say recently then. I guess like when we were growing up, that's how we were, I guess, used to seeing things. But yeah, things are changing, man. A lot is changing, I think, in obviously Minnesota is taking some steps forward. I know last year was a disappointment, and even this year to a degree we could talk about how that is a little bit of a disappointment, leaving some wins out there. But Wisconsin, though, man, I don't know what's going on in Madison, dude. And we talked about it, the danger of changing your identities. And you made the point is it's not just offensively, defensively as well. And this is
why did they ever go away from that 3-4 that was so nasty? It was just so nasty, and you never knew who was blitzing and who was in coverage. And they recruited all these big, fast white boys who were under recruited at outside linebacker. And it worked so well for them. And they had exploited like a place in the market where like those guys were underrated as recruits, so they could consistently get them, even though, other teams didn't, because not that many other teams were running 3-4s, right? Mm-hmm. Most teams are running with a 4-man line. And of the 3-man line teams, some of them are running 3-3-5, like Nebraska. So like there aren't that many true 3-4 teams. Mm-hmm. So they had this totally exploiting this market inefficiency thing. Like they had it figured out, and they just went away from it. And the thing that's funny now is, even if they wanted to go back to it, Fickell can't, because he can't change schemes again. He doesn't have that time. He can't say we're going to be bad for another year while we recruit to a different scheme. He has to he's stuck, you know?
Well, and they sold the fan base on this shiny object, which was Luke Fickell, which is like understandable at the time. I got it. We understood why people wanted him, but now
it seemed like the best hire of the cycle by Wisconsin.
It
seemed like Wisconsin won the coaching cycle. It seemed like it.
It sure did. But I think you and I talked about as soon as they brought on Phil Longo and they started talking about this dairy raid and all this and going away from their identity, you and I both were like, wait a second. Well,
and I was like, what are they going to do on defense too? What are they going to do on defense? Because I understood they needed to update the offense, but they should have honestly, this is out of left field kind of, but I would have been looking at like a Jamie Chadwell type of guy who runs like a modern option offense where it's like you spread guys out in space and you throw the ball a lot. But like you're also running to the edge and pitching it, and the quarterback's running it, and the running backs are running it, and you're still grinding people, but you're throwing the ball. If it's not there, you can throw the ball to your wide receiver who can make a guy miss in space, and you know what I'm saying, that kind of offense. And to me that seemed like both for Nebraska and Wisconsin, that seemed like the natural next evolution of what they should be doing offensively.
Mm-hmm.
But they aren't.
Nope.
They aren't. They're not doing that. So I know Fickell says he's going to run the ball more now, but he spent 2 years recruiting to a spread. How's that going to work now? Is he going to be fitting square pegs into round holes again?
Well, and unless they get steal some really good guys out of the portal, they don't have the recruits coming up in the ranks that I'm like, oh man, look at that guy. Look at him. Because we were always used to seeing that. And right now,
I mean, they're recruiting really well under Fickell, to be fair. The recruiting rankings look really good.
Sure, but I'm not. I guess I don't know. I'm not seeing any flashes from anyone who's been playing. I guess that's like supposed to be the next guy that's impressing me. I guess, yeah, but
Right. No, I'm with you on that. But I think that would be the people who are defending Fickell. The argument would be, well, he's recruiting better than anyone at Wisconsin has.
That is true.
So like you have to give him time and see if that works. But hey, before we get too far into Wisconsin, I just want to say that in this game for Paul Bunyan's Axe, Minnesota had 374 yards to Wisconsin's 167 yards. So Minnesota more than doubled Wisconsin up yardage wise. The Badgers finished just 3 of 14 on third down and 0 for 1 on fourth down. Oof. Minnesota's D did a lot of blitzing DBs on running but downs, which I loved. And because of this, Wisconsin didn't have the numbers to block Minnesota in the box, which allowed Minnesota to get a lot of free unblocked hits on running backs at or behind the line of scrimmage. I thought that was a huge advantage for Minnesota in this game. And like Corey Heatherman, what a revelation he's been, man. Think of how worried we were about losing Joe Rossi, and then PJ went out and found a better defensive coordinator than Joe Rossi.
Well, and finally, the defensive coordinator that we've wanted, who's more aggressive,
who attacks.
We've wanted Joe Rossi to do that forever.
But that's not who he is. That's not who he is.
Nope. Finally, we have someone who attacks and goes at you, and it pays off. I mean, yes, there's times where you get screwed, but man, when it pays off, dude, oh, it's beautiful, and it sure did on Friday.
Yeah, and I would add that this ends a 22-year bowl streak for Wisconsin, and a streak of winning seasons is over as well. So we said it before, but I'm going to say it one more time because it's our show. This game was 24-7, but it could have been so much more. Minnesota absolutely left scoring opportunities on the field. There was the 4th and 5 where he tried to kick. There were a few key drops. There was, a little bit of conservative play calling once the game was out of hand. Like, this was a beating, but it could have truly just been, this could have so easily been like 41-7. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I am thoroughly enjoying, so entertained, and it is giving me, the amount of it's really not a lot, I should say. It's not multiple Badger fans that are trying to come at me and just exuding all kinds of different levels of cope. But it's the same ones, and it's they can't accept or move on. And all I'm going to say to any of you, not that any of you are actually listening, you're probably not. I wouldn't.
Some of them are. Some of them are. You know a few that do. Well, I know you who the handful of people who once in a while downvote us on YouTube. I know who you are.
Well,
so yeah.
I'm just saying you are feeding my soul, and the more you try to troll me, the happier you're making me. So thank you for that. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it really is a special time of year, Rivalry Week. And here's the thing. In the other games where Minnesota recently, they convinced themselves 2018 was a fluke because we won big, but we had a punt return and whatever. And they could talk themselves. There were some turnovers and they could talk themselves into oh, this was a kind of thing where we screwed up and blah, blah, blah. But this wasn't like that. There weren't any turnovers. It was just a beating. Yep. It was just Minnesota beat them on the offensive line, on the defensive line, at the skill positions, at quarterback, in the defensive backfield. Just beaten everywhere. On special teams, just beaten. And when it's that convincing, that hurts. That hurts. And I think Wisconsin is finally realizing oh man, we've lost 3 out of 4 to Minnesota. And we just got crushed by them and didn't look like we belonged on the same field.
Well, I don't know if you're aware, though, but there was a point in time in the 90s and the 2000s, though, where they dominated us. And they like to bring that up a lot. So, because it's really relevant to today. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah, that's a long time ago now for college. Yeah. You got to understand that most of the kids who are recruits now, all they remember is from when they were 10. Right? Yeah. These kids are 16 to 18. So they remember like 6 to 8 years. And I'm just saying it's been trending in Minnesota's direction.
I just love getting the Wikipedia, like Winsipedia thing. Like they just keep sending the same picture over and over again.
It
Like
kind of reminds you of another fan base they can't let go of the past.
there's another one. Yeah, they do that too. Yeah, same thing. They got a lot in common there, But,
Ooh,
it's funny.
Ooh, actually,
they don't like that. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't know. When you say forfeiting your identity, trying to get modern, having it blow up in your face, those are very similar. It's similar enough.
It's true. And they both wear red and white, so
Yeah, there is. That's actually, yeah. Did you know that Barry Alvarez modeled the Wisconsin jerseys off of Nebraska and purposely tried to make them look similar? How nerdy is that?
Why would you do that, dude?
Because he thought that represented like success, and I was just like, I'm so glad that that's not how our jerseys came. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we don't have that we're not saddled with just being a copy of something else.
That's disappointing because like there's so much more you could do with Wisconsin. Like like I've had conversations with Wisconsin, you and I have about like how they could change up their helmets or like their jersey logos, all that kind of stuff. That would be really cool. I'd be for it, But
no, I like them still looking lame. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's keep it. Let's keep them having them be as undesirable as possible. So I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it's fair to say that Wisconsin head coach Luke Fickell is somewhere between despondent and totally lost. This is what he said after the game. Quote, "We're not in a good place. We're 5-7, and really, we're not playing well. And that's the thing. There's no excuse, whether it's injuries, whether it's this, that, or the other thing. I could sit here and tell you things that have cost us wins and put us in position to find our way to climb out of it." Close quote. Fickell then was asked that in his second season at Wisconsin, what his message is to fans who are concerned about the direction of the football program. And he said, quote, "Our job is to get them to believe, is to put the product on the field. Right now, we don't have that opportunity, and we haven't done it. I would understand if they're worried. It's their prerogative, and it's our job to prove it." Close quote.
And didn't he just like today, like
oh man, that is so. He sounds so lost, man. He sounds so lost.
You almost.
I understand if they're worried. I mean, I guess like good for him for being honest, but like, don't you want to be like selling like, no, we're doing this and this, and this is why it's going to be different next year. And like last year when things didn't go well for Minnesota, PJ was like, hey, we were close and like we got this going and like we're going to come back stronger next year.
Yeah.
And, and then they did. And, Bielema did the same thing at Illinois, right? And Luke Fickell's like, yeah, I understand if they don't believe in me anymore.
I wouldn't either.
Man, maybe Fickell gets it turned around. Maybe we just look back on this and it's like just a bump in the road, and his recruits that are pretty highly rated like all play to their potential, and he starts winning next year, and this isn't even a big deal. Like that's totally possible that happens.
Totally.
But like when your head coach says, I understand why the fans are worried, that just makes me worried. It's like it's like he's coming to grips publicly with the fact that things are just as bad as they seem in Madison. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's not like, oh, you can't see how good things are. It's like, no, this is really rough. And if you look at it, 7-6 and 5-7 are not two seasons almost anybody envisioned Luke Fickell having in his first 2 years in Madison.
Yep.
Like I admit to thinking the first year there would be a challenge, but I figured by year 2, Fickell would be picking up momentum. Instead, he's been forced to fire his OC, and he's rumored to be looking to demote and replace his DC with somebody else.
Yeah.
So replacing both coordinators for poor performance after year 2 is just a sign that things aren't going very well, period. The move to an air raid has been a disaster. The move away from a 3-4 defense hasn't gone well either. So where does Wisconsin go from here? John, what do you think?
Well, supposedly he had a come to Jesus moment with his players today, and maybe I'm sure his staff was there too. About like either you're all in or you're out. Like, and if you're not all in, then leave essentially.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see who's all in and who's out. People are obviously transfers are happening already. We're going to learn a lot, I'm sure, in the next few weeks. What's going on at Madison? The fan base is clearly very upset, even those pretending that they're not.
Yeah.
We know what that is, so you're not fooling anybody. But I don't know, man. I don't know because I I was along the same mindset as you. I thought that Luke Fickell year one was still going to probably get to like I was saying 7 to 9 wins. I was like, all right, because I felt like the cupboard wasn't totally bare and they'd be able to do something with what they had. Um, but then by this year, I think what you and I both had them picked to go. I think I had them 8-4. I think.
I think I picked them to go 7-5.
Okay. Still much better than 5-7.
Much
And
better.
I didn't anticipate it going this bad. Now, to be fair, like we've talked
No.
about already, they lost TBD. So
Yeah.
who knows what could have been. But still, I don't think it would have been, even with TBD, I'm not entirely sure they still would have gotten to 8 wins. Maybe not even
No,
7.
I'm not, dude. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. Which games is he flipping because he's so good?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
But it's not good. And the fact that they couldn't successfully change to a running identity and have it work for the most part just shows that they're deficient now in the line of scrimmage in a way they never used to be.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot, man. He's got a lot to figure out there.
Yep.
Because if Fickell, I know he's got a big buyout, but if they go 5-7 again next year, and they have a tough schedule.
Yeah, they do. Really tough.
Are they bringing him back for year 4 if he goes 5-7 2 years in a row?
I feel like Wisconsin will be done. You have to cut if he goes 5-7, or even 6-6. I think wouldn't be good enough for them.
Yeah.
At this point, with what?
Yeah.
At least what I'm being told by Wisconsin fans, because obviously their aspirations are so much higher and more grand than Minnesota. So, obviously national championships, I'm sure, is what you guys expect to get every year on that being who you are. But yeah, man, I think they would fire him if they go 5-7 or 6-6 next year. I think he's gone. I think the Luke Fickell experiment will have failed by their standards. So
yeah, and that would be, man, you don't want to get in the cycle of you fire a coach and everybody transfers out, and then you have to hire another coach, and then you have to wait, and then you have to build, and then you have to hope that, and then you fire a coach, and like that can be.
It can happen.
We've been in that cycle, man. That can be a vicious cycle.
Yep.
A vicious cycle. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Luke Fickell. I think next year is the prove it year where he has to get the job done to some extent. At least go 7-5, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And show that he's got things pointed back in the right direction. As for Minnesota, it hasn't been the elite season. They were very close to achieving, and we've talked about the games they were very close to winning, but didn't, like North Carolina, Michigan, Rutgers, and Penn State. But they still have an opportunity to win 8 games. And also in the Big Ten standings, the Gophers finished tied for 7th with a winning 5-4 conference record. So 8 teams in the Big Ten had winning conference records, and 10 didn't, I believe, something like that. And Minnesota had a winning conference record. So I think that's still, despite the fact that it could have been a lot better, that's a decent showing, all things considered.
Oh, yeah. Well, 4.5 win total, man, and expected to finish towards the bottom of the Big Ten. By
4.5 win total, and 4.5 would have been low on our Big Ten win total.
Yep.
We surpassed that. Even, yeah.
So,
but we go through this every year, man. Every year, Vegas underrates Minnesota. Every year, we say, actually, Minnesota, here's why Minnesota could be pretty good. And we're going to be back here in June.
Oh,
and they're going to be saying, well, Max Brosmer's gone. Daniel Jackson's gone. Minnesota's done. It's over. Stick a fork in them.
But somehow somehow miraculously, a couple of the teams that either didn't make a bowl game or didn't get anywhere near their expected win total will be picked to win, 8 to 10 games somehow.
But man, I can't get down about that right now because Minnesota won the Axe, and it feels good to have the Axe back. I've seen it in its glory, back in its case in Minneapolis,
where it belongs,
in Dinkytown, where it belongs, and it's just good to see the order of the universe restored to the way it's supposed to be.
That's right. And frankly, you should return the slab of bacon as well, since you freaking stole that.
Yes.
And we're still keeping tally, and we were beating you even after that because we were owning the series. So that belongs in Dinkytown permanently, not in Madison.
Give us our bacon back. We want our bacon back. Okay.
I want my bacon.
Yeah, give it back. All right. So the Gophers looks like Bull. Well, we don't need to talk about Bulls right now. We'll talk about that later. All right, moving on. We had, but yeah. Anyway, Minnesota continues to be one of the most reliable programs in the Big Ten on a perennial basis. So Gopher fans, be proud. 5-4 in the Big Ten after starting 0-2. Be proud. It's pretty good. It's real good, actually. All right. So next up, we had Black Friday, the night game, the 8-4 Iowa Hawkeyes 13, the 6-6 Nebraska Cornhuskers 10. I don't know what to say about this game, John. Iowa could not move the ball for pretty much the entire game. They scored field goals off of 2 Nebraska fumbles and got exactly 1 explosive catch and run from Caleb Johnson on a short pass that went for 72 yards and a touchdown after Caleb Johnson made a couple guys miss and turned on the Jets. But besides that 1 long touchdown catch and run, Nebraska dominated this game statistically.
Yep.
Nebraska had 20 first downs to just 5 for Iowa. 5 first downs in a game they won. What? Nebraska had 334 yards to just 164 for Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
They outpassed and outrushed Iowa by significant margins. Nebraska went 8 of 17 on third down. Well, Iowa, get this. Iowa goes 0 for 10 on third down. 0 for 10 on third down, and they won the game. But Iowa kept punting and playing defense. Punting and playing defense.
That's what they do.
And playing defense. And it worked because of that Nebraska fumble by Dylan Raiola and a muffed punt from Nebraska's Vincent Shavers, which gave Nebraska the ball at the Cornhusker 4-yard line. Yet even then, Iowa settled for a field goal. They couldn't score. Raiola actually had 3 fumbles, but they only lost 1. Raiola's fumbling was a big problem in this game. And none of it matters. It doesn't matter that Nebraska played the better game. It doesn't matter that Iowa looked like garbage offensively. All that matters is that Iowa has a great punter and an even better kicker to go with a good defense. And that, coupled with the fact that head coach Kirk Ferentz clearly signed a Faustian pact in the late 90s, means that Iowa wins all sorts of weird games that they have no business winning.
Yep.
But I can't cry too hard for Nebraska because the Cornhuskers they blew several chances to ice this game. Their offense played reasonably well, but only managed 10 points. That's a huge problem. And it cost them a win on Black Friday. Iowa QB Jackson Stratton finished just 8 for 15 for 115 yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks for a QBR of just 21.7. And they won. I just don't have any words for that.
This shouldn't be possible.
No, it really shouldn't. Running back Caleb Johnson had just 45 yards on 2.6 yards per rush and 0 TDs. Or no, and 0 TDs rushing. He had that one long catch and run.
Yeah.
But besides that, Iowa recorded 1 reception of 17 yards, and the rest of their catches either went for single-digit yards or negative yards. I don't even know what to say at this point about that offensively. For Iowa, linebacker Jay Higgins had 12 tackles, including a TFL, so good day for him. For Nebraska, QB Dylan Raiola went a solid 22 for 32 for 190 yards, just 5.9 yards per attempt, 0 TDs, 0 interceptions, QBR 72.5. So they beat Iowa in QBR by 50-plus points and still lost. Incredible. Emmett Johnson had 71 yards rushing, while Dante Dowdell had 50. Both went for just under 4 yards per rush. Wide receiver Jamal Banks had 4 for 41 yards, and backup tight end Nate had 2 for 39. But Nebraska's receptions were spread around to a lot of different players. John, what did you think about this game?
This was insane, dude. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but at the same time, like you said, you brought it about that this is a Kirk Ferentz any game that Kirk Ferentz has his hand in when it comes to Iowa and games like this, man, like you just know you cannot. It doesn't matter how well you're playing. If the score continues to be this close, just assume you're probably going to lose. Doesn't matter.
You have to get a lead and like a real lead.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We managed to make it happen because we had an outstanding field goal kicker a couple years ago, but like that was the exception, not the rule. Like that was a rare case. So the fact that this continues to happen so often, we've said this for years, and I agree that Kirk Ferentz has signed a deal with the devil, and there's no one out there who can convince me otherwise.
There's no other explanation for it.
I mean, you just look at his face, and I don't think the man has a soul anyway. So he's a freaking robot.
He's a vampire.
Yeah. He's not a real person.
Gum chewing vampire.
Yeah. When he retires, if he ever does, I don't know. Maybe he will be there forever. But
yeah, dude.
Good riddance. Anyway, I feel for you, Husker fans, like because we've been there so many times with this Iowa team, and it's infuriating, and you did everything you could I guess to a point, other than making mistakes, vital mistakes, and that is what he's waiting for. And when you do, those teams pounce and they make you pay for it every freaking time.
Yeah.
And it may not be all the time because you scored a touchdown. They'll just take clock off. They'll do something to make it so it's just going to be harder the next time you have a chance. And that's how they do it. And it's the most infuriating thing in the whole freaking world. And it makes you want to pull your hair out. And then even at the end, when you have a shot and Dylan Raiola fumbles the ball and you just there's just no getting back. It's done. It's over. I don't, and that's what it was. And it's heartbreaking, man. It rips your freaking heart out. And Kirk Ferentz does this all the time.
Yeah, the amount of times Minnesota's been the better team but still managed to lose to Kirk Ferentz is it's frustrating. But yeah, he's a really good coach who maximizes the talent he has. Even, he didn't have a quarterback really. He doesn't have anyone to throw the ball to. Okay, he's going to run the ball and play defense and play special teams and wait for you to make mistakes. And Nebraska, just unfortunately, not only did they have 2 fumbles, but they fumbled at the worst part at the end of the game in their own territory.
Yep.
And then Iowa gets the walk-off field goal, and that's it. So, yeah, it's beyond devastating. It's brutal. And yeah, Nebraska's going to a bowl, but they better win that bowl because they are 6-6 in a year where they got a break scheduling wise.
Yeah.
And it would be really embarrassing to end this year with a losing record because after all that preseason hype about the easy schedule and how Nebraska was back, I think Nebraska really needs to win the bowl game.
Yeah. No, absolutely. If they want to shut people up about any of the doubters and all the people that continue to rip on them, which I've been guilty of it because of all the preseason hype and then no results. You've finally gotten some results here. You've reached bowl eligibility. You're going to go to a bowl game. You're probably going to be favored by with whoever you play, more than likely. And if you don't go out there and just dominate, then it's going to be another long.
It's going to be a long off season. Yeah, dude.
Now,
I agree with that.
To be fair, the national media will still probably just recycle and rinse and repeat and do the whole thing all over again.
Yeah, but in that facility, they desperately need that. Yes. They need that validation. You need that at some point.
Yeah.
You got to take a victory lap, John. I even said they were going 7-5. You said no. You said you weren't picking a winning record for Nebraska until they proved it on the field. Well, they didn't prove it on the field. They didn't have an end with a winning record. Yep. You are correct.
I called 6-6, and
yes, you did.
Here we are at 6-6, and look, this is, and I even said it. I said it at the preseason when we were talking about and breaking down Nebraska. I said I expect an improvement.
Yeah,
but not anywhere near the improvement that everyone else is talking about. Like a 9-10 win freaking team. No way in hell. No, not a chance. But 6-6, yes, and here we go. And that's an improvement. And I'm happy for you. I genuinely mean that. And you can build off this. You can build off this.
Yeah.
So hopefully Matt Rule can take advantage of that and moving forward, and it'll help push you on and continue to find improvement year after year and moving forward. But you're a developmental program now, and that's the way it's got to go, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Now, Iowa, I don't even know what to say, man. I have no idea what's going on here. Because every year we think like, oh, like this offense is so bad. How can they possibly continue to win 8, 9, 10 games, and yet they continue to do it with some of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life.
Ever seen at this level. Yeah.
I have no words. I don't even know how to go at this anymore.
I mean, to be fair, they had the easier schedule this year, and they were supposed to be a college football playoff contender, and they didn't win 10 games like they did last year. It didn't happen.
True.
So they did fall off a little bit. They played an easier schedule this year, I would argue, and still, went 8-4.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a successful season on a lot of levels, but again, like Iowa fans got to be wondering what if, and you look back at that loss to Iowa State, and you look at, so it's just they had some moments where they could have been a little better than they were, and it just kind of didn't happen for them. The loss to Michigan State, which was pretty ugly, to a rebuilding, not a very good Michigan State team. So those are pretty bad, in retrospect. Not that it's bad to lose to Iowa State, but just that, you could have had those two games pretty easily, and you would have been in the college football playoff probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
But didn't happen.
No, it didn't. So we'll see. And I'm assuming they're going to end up at like the ReliaQuest or the Music City Bowl or the
something like that. Yeah,
First Responders Bowl or something like that. But we'll see. We'll see how they do. But yeah,
it'll be interesting.
It will be.
It'll be interesting. I'm really curious to see if Holgorsen, if they can keep him as OC or not. I think that's a big deal. I think that finding a new defensive coordinator won't be that hard, but I do think finding the right offensive coordinator would be harder. And I think that'd be a big deal if they could keep him.
Yeah. I think so too.
All right, moving on. We had the now 12-0 undefeated number 1 Oregon Ducks 49, the 6-6 Washington Huskies 21. This was a beatdown. Even in the first half, there was a clear delineation between these teams. And even when things were going okay for Washington, I always felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's not a knock on Washington. This Oregon squad is just fantastic. This game was just 14-6 Oregon in the second quarter when disaster struck for Washington. Star running back Jonah Coleman fumbled on Washington's next play from scrimmage. Oregon scored 2 plays later, and it wasn't much later than that Oregon scored again on a Dylan Gabriel 4-yard keeper to make it 28-6. From there, the route was on. Washington scored its final TD in garbage time.
Mm-hmm.
For Oregon, Heisman candidate QB Dylan Gabriel was an efficient 16 for 23 for 209 yards, 9.1 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, 0 picks for a QBR of 93.8. Running back Jordan James had 99 yards and 6.6 yards per rush and 2 TDs. Wide receiver Trayshawn Holden had 3 for 73. Otherwise, the ball was spread around as tight end Terrence Ferguson, running back Jordan James, and wide receiver Tez Johnson all contributed 3 to 4 catches. And DN Mateo Uagalele had a nice day with 6 tackles and 2 sacks for the game. For Washington, QB Damon Williams was the starter, and he played really well, completing 17 of 20 passes, 201 yards, 10.1 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks for a QBR of 74.3. Washington was just totally unable to run the ball as star Jonah Coleman ended with 11 carries for just 3 yards. The Huskies had just 43 yards rushing as a team. Washington receivers Giles Jackson had 6 for 69 yards and a TD, while Denzel Boston had just 3 catches for 43 yards. John, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it was a dominant performance. I know it was a little bit close, somewhat, I guess, in the first half. It looked like it could have been a competitive game. But when it comes to this Oregon team, man, they're just so dominant. And Dylan Gabriel is, if he better be, obviously Heisman candidate, but like, I mean, dude,
he should be a Heisman finalist, full stop.
I feel like he should be. He better be.
Yes.
He's absolutely insane. Video game numbers. It's easy it really just looks easy, and it helps obviously having so much insane talent to throw to.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But you know what? Ohio State has talent too, and they went 10-2.
Yeah.
So Oregon went 12-0.
It's true, and Dan Lanning, man, give him full credit, dude. Like, and we said it at the beginning of the season that Oregon, out of all the new Pac-12 teams that are coming in, that are now going to be Big Ten teams, we said Oregon was the team that was the best, most prepared, and they will be competing for the Big Ten championship game, and here they are.
Yep.
So, victory lap there for both of us, and Washington, like. I think with everything that they went through and all the talent they lost and the new coaches and all that kind of stuff, 6-6 is pretty respectable.
Oh yeah,
and they were competitive in a lot of games too. That even the ones that they lost, like this was not a soft team. This wasn't just a total failure of a season. Husky fans, I would say like this is there's something to move on and build from here. There's good things happening. So I wouldn't be too down and out. It was bound to happen.
I like Damon Williams, man.
I do too. He's fun. He's fun to watch, dude.
I think really he could be really good next year.
Yep. Yeah, I think so
by
too.
then.
Yeah, I think he's a lot of fun. And I think there's things to move on to and build from there. And in Washington, man, that's just the way it goes there. I feel like they don't stay down long.
Nope.
They generally give it another year or two, and they'll be back up competing probably for the conference title. At that point, could happen. And they'll trade blows with Oregon, I think. But right now, this year, dude, it wouldn't surprise me if Oregon won the whole dang thing, dude. It's
setting up for them to do it now that they don't have to play Ohio State in the rematch. Like it's everything. The path is lined up for Oregon to win a national title. If they don't have anyone to blame but themselves. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, moving on to a result that I'm not happy about. I'm going to be honest. It was a pretty great weekend, but I am not on board for this. We had the 7-5 Michigan Wolverines 13, the now 10-2 Ohio State Buckeyes 10.
Can I stop you 1
second?
I apologize. I meant to touch on this before we moved on. I have one gripe with the Oregon-Washington game.
What's that?
Why aren't you wearing your school colors, Oregon?
Yes.
It's rivalry week.
Yes.
Why are you not wearing green and yellow? I don't get it. I get it. You have a million freaking combo options, but it's rivalry week, dude.
Yeah. Wear the colors
together.
Come on, Ducks.
It's how it goes. Them's the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. In rivalry week. Yeah. Please wear the colors. You look ridiculous.
All right.
Cool.
One critique of that team. That's it.
So,
yeah. Moving on.
Anyway, the Michigan Wolverines 13, the Ohio State Buckeyes 10. First of all, I'm going to start off with a brag. I said Michigan had turned into a really talented version of Iowa. Well, in this game, they played like Iowa to the point where they won a game they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
This game has me totally dumbfounded, speechless, John. This game I'm not just weirded out and upset about this game. It has me questioning my faith in humanity. So why, Mike? Why get so torn up in a metaphorical knots over a football game that doesn't even involve the Golden Gophers? And I'll tell you why. Because this game made punditry and analysis feel totally useless. Everything I knew about both Ohio State and Michigan suggested this was going to be a lopsided game in Ohio State's favor. Even Vegas had Ohio State as a 3-touchdown favorite in this game. So what happened? I'll tell you what happened. Ryan Day makes emotional decisions. What do you mean he makes emotional decisions, Mike? I'll tell you what I mean. Jim Harbaugh broke Ryan Day's brain by just running the ball up the middle for the last 3 years in the rivalry. Ryan Day decided he was going to do the same thing. He went out and got fancy portal running backs, Chip Kelly as OC to fix the running game, and the running game was fixed right up until they lost 3 dudes to injury on the offensive line. So that's one problem. The other problem is that Michigan has 2 All-American defensive tackles. And once again, Ohio State is down several starting OLs. But despite the fact that the running game up the middle wasn't working, Ryan Day continued to try to run the ball specifically up the middle. When they ran an option to the edge, the running back got 10+ yards. But Day stopped running those outside runs. He wanted to prove he could beat Michigan up the middle like a man. And ultimately, he couldn't. But I ask why Ryan Day, when you've got Jeremiah Smith and you got Emeka Egbuka and you got Carnell Tate wide receiver, why are you wasting your time trying to run the ball? The moment you realized you couldn't run the ball, you should have been challenging those DBs in the passing game. Will Johnson didn't even play in this game. They were ripe for the picking, but Day didn't do that. Day ran the ball 26 times for no apparent reason other than he seemed to enjoy banging his head into a wall. He rarely forced the Michigan D to defend the edges where they are far less talented. It was bizarre. At one point, Ohio State had the ball deep in Michigan territory, and Day ran the ball 3 straight times to try to set up a field goal, and then Ohio State missed the field goal. Oh, did I mention that the kicker missed 2 field goal attempts in a game Ohio State lost by 3? So, yeah, that happened. Ohio State kicker Jaden Fielding let the whole program down twice when they needed him the most. You make either, this goes to overtime, make both, and they win. But his only make of the day was from 29 yards. Just a miserable performance from Fielding. For Michigan, QB Davis Warren was just 9 for 16 for 62 yards. 3.9 yards per attempt, 0 TD, and 2 picks for a QBR of 35.9, and they won. Running back Khalil Mullings was the star of the day for Michigan. Yeah, it took him 32 carries to get there, but he managed 116 yards, 1 TD. Mullings was the Michigan offense on this day because Michigan had just 62 yards passing. But due to Ryan Day's bizarre decisions, Ohio State didn't look much better than Michigan on offense. Will Howard was just 19 for 33 for 175 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt, 1 TD, and 2 picks, one of which was one of the worst throws I've ever seen from a quarterback at the Big Ten level. Like that one early in the game that ended up in a Michigan touchdown a play or two later. That was the dumbest thing I've ever almost seen. Should have been a pick 6. Judkins and Henderson were both shut down because they ran them up the middle for no reason. So, yeah, I don't get it. Get your fast running backs to the edge where they're fast. Wide receiver Carnell Tate has 6 catches for 58 yards, but Emeka Egbuka only had 4 for 51, and Jeremiah Smith just 5 for 35 and a TD. This was a day when you needed to feature your elite receivers, and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly just failed to do that. So, John, what do you think about the most consequential upset of the entire season in the Big Ten?
I'm with you in as far as the frustration. I guess I know anything can happen on rivalry week, obviously, and
to a point.
But when you're Ohio State and you are set up to win a national championship, and you're playing one of the worst Michigan teams we've seen in over a decade. Probably.
15 years since Rich Rod. The worst Michigan team in 15 years.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, and you end up losing to said team. And not only that, but you can only manage to put up 10 points. That's it. With this vaunted Ohio State offense that has insane amounts of talent all over the place, and you can only score 10 points. I have no words. And honestly, all of the Ohio State fans out there who are calling for Ryan Day's head, I know you live in a different world than I do as a Gopher fan. We don't exist in the same plane. But in your reality, this is absolutely unacceptable. And
unacceptable.
And so your
1
anger,
and 4. 1 and 4.
Yeah. So
that's John Cooper territory, man. John Cooper was 2 and 8. Now he's 1 and 4. That's as bad as John Cooper.
And you brought this up at the beginning of the season.
Next year, he'll be worse than John Cooper. Think about that.
And you brought this up at the beginning of the season. You mentioned it. You said if Ryan Day doesn't beat Michigan, he will be fired. Now,
I think he should be, but I don't think they're gonna. But it doesn't look like they're gonna.
I mean, the only thing I feel like that would redeem him is winning a national title. That's it.
Yeah.
But
or making it there.
Does he get fired even if he doesn't make it there?
I think he's got to win 2 playoff games to feel like he's got a chance to be safe. Don't you?
Okay. I mean, that's what I would think. Yeah, but I don't know.
If he wins just 1 and goes out in the second round in the Rose Bowl or whatever, I don't know, man. I think he's got to win 2 playoff games, have a shot to win the whole thing. You know?
Yeah.
Have the shot to win the whole thing. But you got to throw the ball, man. What are you doing? You have the best wide receivers in the country.
Yep.
Throw the ball.
Yep.
Throw the ball. And if you're going to run it to the edges, not at the All-American defensive. Like, did you scout them? Like, what are you doing? Or were you just like lifting weights all week, look in the mirror and like grunting? I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Yeah. Well, one of these, what we need to do, what we'll end up doing is we'll record two of our friends giving their little breakdown, and we'll post it on the next pod, maybe of our friend Phil and our friend Max. We'll have them we'll give them 2 minutes each. Actually,
to rant on Ohio State. Now I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Why not challenge their DBs by throwing to your wide receivers? Why not make them pay for the fact they have a mediocre secondary? They played right into their hands. Why not run blitz more? You know they're going to run the ball. So why not attack? What Corey Heatherman did to Wisconsin?
Yeah.
I don't know why Ryan Day and Jim Knowles weren't doing that to Michigan. Michigan deserves credit for showing up and playing hard, but they didn't do anything sneaky or tricky to win this game.
No. They were very disciplined and sound with the fundamentals, and like that's all they did, man. They just played a solid football game and they won.
They didn't bring any good trick play. Like Sherrone Moore didn't. What I'm saying is he didn't do anything fancy to win this game. He just hoped that Ohio State would screw up, and Ohio State screwed up.
Yep.
And that was enough. And how does a $20 million roster lose to a team without a viable QB who just went 6-5 for the rest of the season? How is that possible for this version of Ohio State to lose to this version of Michigan? It's the most out of left field, unpredictable, absurd thing that's happened in college football in years, and it's shaken my faith entirely. Yeah. Shaken my faith in myself, in this game. I don't know how can I know anything anymore? I'm like in V for Vendetta when Natalie Portman's like, I can't feel anything anymore. And like, that's how this game made me feel. I was like, like just rage. Like what? Like, how is this possible? Because this hurts our bowl placement because they'll jump Michigan over us. They will.
Yeah.
So I'm just pissed about the whole thing.
Thanks a lot, Ryan Day.
Yeah, Ryan Day. See what you've done. See the butterfly effect of what you've done.
You've hurt the Gophers, and that's not okay. That's unacceptable.
Not okay. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I think Ryan Day's got to win 2 playoff games or he's done. Yeah. So good luck, buddy. Mm-hmm. You could have just beat Michigan and that would have been good enough. Wouldn't have mattered if you won the title or not, but nope, couldn't do it. Had to be a man, had to be tough. Well, how tough do you feel now, Ryan?
Yeah.
How tough do you feel now?
Oof.
All right. Next up, we have the 11-1, now number 3 ranked Penn State Nittany Lions 44. The 4-8 Maryland Terrapins 7. James Franklin has resented Maryland for years, ever since they promised to give him the job there, but then reneged on that offer and hired somebody else. Maryland isn't very good. James Franklin has not forgotten being slighted and passed over by Maryland. After a tense first quarter in which Maryland initially held a 7-0 lead after recovering a Nick Singleton fumble, it was close, but it was only close until the second quarter when Penn State scored touchdowns on 4 of their 5 possessions. Well, the defense forced 4 punts, a turnover on downs, and snagged 2 picks. QB Drew Aller finished 17 for 26 for 171 yards, 6.6 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks. Star running back Nicholas Singleton had 13 carries for 87 yards, 6.7 yards per rush, and 2 TDs. Running back Katron Allen had just 34 yards, also on 13 carries for a pedestrian 2.6 yards per rush. Why does Katron Allen still get the same amount of carries as Nicholas Singleton? Does Allen know where the bodies are buried? Does he know? Because Nicholas Singleton is so much better than he is, and James Franklin treats them like they're 1A and 1B. Mm-hmm. And they just haven't been, like, ever.
Not even close. No, not even close.
So anyway, Tyler Warren had 6 catches for 68 yards and a TD. He also had 3 runs for 32 yards for a total of 100 yards from scrimmage. Wide receiver Amari Evans caught 4 balls for 49 yards. D-end Abdul Carter was a wrecking ball with 6 tackles, including 2 sacks. Dude was harassing Maryland all day. For Maryland, backup QB MJ Morris was just 14 for 24 for 112 yards, 4.7 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 3 costly picks, a QBR of 12. That's a brutal QBR. Wow. RB Robin Hemby had 64 yards and 4.9 yards per rush. But Maryland's top receivers were shut down as Ty Felton had just 4 for 27 yards. and Prather had just one catch, although it was for 25 yards and a TD. Uncle Mike Locksley got visibly angry with Penn State's James Franklin for throwing the ball for a late touchdown after the game had been decided. Franklin basically said after the game, our backups work hard and they get to play too. But Locksley did the bro hug thing where he took the one hand on James Franklin, like on his hand, and took the other hand and secured his shoulder, and like so he couldn't walk away. And that clearly and rightfully pissed Franklin off. So Mike Locksley sounded defeated after the game. Locksley said, quote, "Disappointing end to a long, long season. Disappointed in the way this thing finished. Disappointed in our inability to get things going," close quote. John, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, it's just Maryland has just been a mess, man.
Yeah.
And especially after losing Billy Edwards Jr., like there's just no hope. You were not going to beat this Penn State team. You're not going to beat anybody, frankly. I think without Billy Edwards Jr., like you've got a couple good wide receivers in Ty Felton and Caden Prather, but that's it. And Roman Hemby isn't the guy that he used to be. I think he's lost a step over the last couple of years as well. So. Yeah. There's not a lot going for Maryland, and I think Mike Locksley is, at this point in time, you got to think he might be also on the hot seat. Is kind of where my mind's at with him. He's just not getting it done. He's had a couple decent seasons, like don't get me wrong, and I don't think he's a bad coach, but it just doesn't seem to be trending in the right direction for him.
His teams don't get better.
They don't. They start out kind of hot.
Yep.
But then they never improve, and everyone else then surpasses
gets better,
them.
and I think that's a problem.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, I don't know what to say about Maryland anymore at this point in time because it just seems to be the trend with Mike Locksley. And I have to think that they're probably considering that, maybe.
I think they got to fire him because here's the thing. You don't want to fire him next year because next year there's going to be like 5 SEC jobs open.
Yeah.
Like there are like going to be a bunch of guys who get fired in the SEC next year. You don't want to be competing with that. So, like, to me, if you're going to fire Locksley, you got to fire him this year now.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't seem like they're going to do that, though.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I know he's done some good things, but we talked about it. When you lose Tunga Vailoa, what are you going to do? And Billy Edwards Jr. is definitely an above-average quarterback, but he is not Talia.
No.
And you don't have anybody like that coming up. MJ Morris is not that.
No, he's not.
So I don't know, man. I think I agree. I think I would go with firing him this year. And moving on and hopefully finding somebody better that can maybe restart this program. But it's tough. They're in a really tough spot, man, because I know Locksley loves it there, and I'm sure he's loved by everybody because he's a lovable guy. Like
totally. He's Uncle Mike.
Right. I love him, dude. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think he's so nice to have in the Big Ten, but he's not getting the job done the way that I'm sure Maryland is expecting or needing him to do. So, but Penn State though, they're doing exactly what they've been doing this whole season. Drew Aller is just efficient. He's not spectacular, but he's efficient, and he protects the ball. Nicholas Singleton does he's always consistent and steady. Tyler Warren,
he's really good.
Freaking Tyler Warren things. That freaking broken play where Aller should have been sacked like 3 freaking times, and still managed to escape because he's a horse. And then pitches it to Tyler Warren, where he hurdles a guy, and then still gets I'm like, what is This is what you do on NCAA college football. Like that's the type of play you do there. But they did it in real life, and it was absolutely insane. And I think Tyler Warren also set a record. I'm not sure what it was, but probably like receiving touchdowns or something like that. But for Penn State, because he's a freaking freak, man. He's terrifying.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. Best. He should be a Heisman finalist. He better be.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
He better be. All right, since you're not going to be on the preview pod this week, what kind of chance do you give Penn State against Oregon in this Big Ten title game?
I think it can be close for 3 quarters. I think Penn State's defense is outstanding. I think that they can move the ball enough and maybe keep it close, a low-scoring game for about 3 quarters. But I don't think they're going to be able to contain Oregon's offense.
No.
Until I think if there's going to be some kind of play, whether it's a turnover or something, and it's just the momentum is going to swing, and Oregon's just going to take off and probably win by 2 scores.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think now that Oregon has Tez Johnson back, I think Ohio State could have matched up maybe. I just don't think Penn State can. Just because if they had somebody besides Tyler Warren who scared you at receiver, but they don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yep.
All right, next. Oh, go on.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you saw Minnesota, almost do it. And I think, and Oregon they got a lot more talent to go around. And I don't see it ending closely, I think, but I do think it'll probably be close for at least 3 quarters and then take off. But we'll see, man. Good luck to the Nittany Lions.
For sure. Good luck to them as well. All right, next up, we had the 11-1 Notre Dame Fighting Irish 49, the 6-6 USC Trojans 35. USC was in this game the entire way. They were driving for the tying touchdown with just a few minutes to go, and then Jaden Maeva threw a 100-yard pick six. And it was like he threw it up for grabs in a game of 500 and was just like, all right, go get it, whoever wants to. And his receiver fell down, and it was bad. Then moments later, he threw another pick six. Before that, USC was right there with Notre Dame. It was a pretty scrappy performance from the Trojans until they screwed it up late. The difference in this game, aside from those crippling interception returns, was that Notre Dame was just bigger and tougher than USC on the line of scrimmage. It's the same sort of problem USC had all year in the Big Ten. Notre Dame QB Riley Leonard was 17 for 22 for 155 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, 1 pick for a QBR of 84. Notre Dame running back Jadarian Price had 12 carries for 111 yards, 9.3 yards per rush, and a TD. And star running back Jeremiah Love had 99 yards and 7.6 yards per rush and a TD when he left with an injury. So we hope he's okay. I've heard he's okay, so that's good. Tight end Mitchell Evans had 5 catches for 59 yards and a TD. Otherwise, the receivers didn't do much, as they usually don't for Notre Dame. They're very similar to Penn State that way. The Irish won this game dominating in the trenches, particularly in that run game. And USC QB Jaden Maeva was 27 for 49, 360 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, and 2 picks for a QBR of 76.3. Running back Quentin Joyner at 83 yards on 8.3 yards per rush after Woody Marks left the game with an injury. Wide receiver Mekhi Lemon had a big day with 9 catches for 133 yards for 14.8 yards per catch. USC coach Lincoln Riley said after the game, quote, "We had a couple opportunities to make some competitive plays there in the second half, and they made a couple more of them. We've made massive progress on defense in every way you can measure it, but certainly today wasn't our best," close quote. John, what'd you think about this one?
I'll say there's been improvements on defense in the secondary. I'll give them that. I've seen the secondary look better this year, obviously, than last year, and as it's gone on, I feel like I've seen growth. But dude, the defensive line is just horrible. Jadarian Price, excuse me. I believe he had 100 yards on 8 carries, which is very impressive. And most of those runs were right up the middle. Yeah. And there was nothing USC could do. So it really does come down to everything we talked about prior to the season and what we've talked about throughout the season. When it comes to USC, they really need to invest heavily on the offensive and defensive lines. And if they can't do that, if they can't shore that up in any kind of way, it's just going to be the same story next year. Nothing's going to change. Yep. And you can think you have the next great quarterback. You can think you have another great running back, which, again, we talked about. The running game worked much better generally throughout the season. But if you don't have those horses up front, then it's just going to be another 6-7 win season. That's just what it's going to be. And that's not the standard that I know USC, expects. So they want to be competing for the Big Ten championship game, and it's just not going to happen if that trend continues. And again, this comes down to Lincoln Riley. So, I stand by what I've said before for a few weeks now. Miller Moss is not the problem. It's Lincoln Riley, and that's who it always has been and will be unless he changes. So that's it.
Yeah, no, I think you put it well. I think Lincoln Riley has a lot to prove next year if he's going to continue coaching the Trojans for the future and throughout that contract he signed. My last thing about this game is Notre Dame doesn't deserve to leapfrog Penn State. I don't care what happens against Oregon. I don't care.
They don't. I agree.
They struggled plenty in this game. they are as limited in the passing game as Penn State is, and they don't have anybody like Tyler Warren the way Penn State does.
That's very true.
You know,
Yep.
and against real teams with real lines of scrimmage, Notre Dame's not going to be able to just run all over them and have that be okay. That's not going to work.
No.
So when that happens, they're going to be in trouble, and they don't have a Tyler Warren like Penn State does. So Penn State is the better team, deserves to be rated higher than Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I think we should take a little bit of a victory lap, though, with USC. Both of us said, I said 7-5. What did you
I said
say?
7-5 too.
Okay. And obviously that did not happen, and we said it for the exact reasons that they are now 6-6.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good point. And people gave us such a hard time. They were like,
lot.
oh, you're haters. Oh, we have all this talent. You have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people really hate it.
It's like we might know what we're talking about. I don't know.
It is. It's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like that, at least when it comes to the Big Ten.
Yes.
And how it works in this conference.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we had the Indiana Hoosiers, the 11-1, number 10 Indiana Hoosiers 66, the 1-11 Purdue Boilermakers 0. So let's collectively whistle at this ridiculous score. Here's a fun fact. 66 points is the largest margin of victory in the old Oaken Bucket game since Purdue beat Indiana 68-0 in 1892. It's also the worst loss in Purdue program history. That's from friend of the pod, Robert Holbrook on Twitter. The final score was 66-0. I just want to say that I predicted the final score would be 63-3.
You did.
So other than giving Purdue a little too much credit, I came very close to hitting this one squarely on the head. And I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. Frequent listeners to the show know that I've been saying for weeks that when Curt Cignetti gets his chance to embarrass Purdue, he's going to make them look ridiculous. I've been saying this for two reasons. One, he needs style points for the College Football Playoff Committee. Two, Cignetti wants to prove that Purdue does in fact suck. That's what he said when he took the job. And Cignetti loves backing up his own big talk and then smirking about how pleased he is with himself. That's the Cignetti way. So, yeah, I knew this was going to happen, and I knew he was going to be ridiculous, but not even I could have predicted how petty Curt Cignetti would be. Curt Cignetti ran a fake punt up 38-0. I repeat, up 6 scores in this game. Cignetti executed a fake punt, and it worked. That is next level petty. That is not even passive aggressive. It's just explicitly aggressive. It's an FU to every Purdue coach, player, and fan. It was such an all-encompassing beating that Purdue fired its head football coach, Ryan Walters, after the game. Purdue reportedly did not want to fire Walters. They wanted to give him another year, but Indiana beat him so badly, it made them switch plans and fire their coach. That is a historic beating. John, this was one of the most lopsided rivalry games I've ever seen. Indiana had 586 yards to just 67 for Purdue. 586-67. That's bonkers. How is that even possible? How do you play 4 quarters of a football game and amass under 100 yards? That's crazy. That's like 100 yards is 25 yards a quarter. They couldn't do it.
I mean, you have to think the players just gave up. Like Purdue.
Like,
you
could see them quit. You saw them quit.
They quit. They were like, we're just done. And man, I don't know. I feel terrible. I mean, I can't imagine, and then my boy Hudson Card out there, dude. I know.
It's a rough day for him.
Really was. Sorry, buddy.
He was 6 of 13 for 35 yards, 2.7 yards per attempt, 0 TDs, 1 pick for a QBR of 7.7. A single-digit QBR is incredibly hard to attain, and you have to be having an especially terrible game to get there. So kudos to Purdue for that distinction, because that's definitely a team effort. It's not just Hudson Card. It takes everybody to get a guy to 6 for 13 for 35 yards.
Wow.
And a pick. Hoosiers QB Curtis Rourke was 23 for 31 for 349 yards, 11.3 yards per attempt, 6 TDs, 0 picks. That's crazy. Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton combined for 21 carries for 110 yards. This was all about the passing attack, led by 8 catches for 165 yards and 2 TDs for star wide receiver Elijah Surratt. Receivers Keyshawn Williams, Omar Cooper, Miles Cross, and tight end Zach Horton all got TD passes as well. For IU's D, linebacker Jalen Walker had 5 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and 4 TFLs and 2 passes defended. So great day for him. And for Purdue, they couldn't run the ball. Devin Mockbee had 14 carries for 21 yards, and tight end Max Clare had caught 5 balls for 36 yards. Those were the offensive highlights for Purdue. They were non-existent on a night when Purdue not only didn't score, but didn't really threaten to score. Purdue punted 9 times. It was a total mess. John, what did you think about the old Oaken Bucket game?
It was an old-fashioned freaking beatdown, man. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
I don't even like. I couldn't really continue to watch it at a certain point.
Oh no, I turned it off, and once it got into the 40s, I was like, "Come on."
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I was the same. It was really rough. It was really hard to watch at a certain point in time, but also like there is something that does excite me about the smugness of Curt Cignetti that I thoroughly enjoy. I know friend of the pod, Phil, on the last podcast hates him with a passion.
Yep.
But like that also kind of makes me like him even more.
Like, oh yeah.
Not just because of Phil, not because of you, Phil, but like the people that like just don't like him for that reason, that he said something, he was going to do it, and he did it. He's pretty much done everything, almost, you know. He came very close to it.
He didn't make the Big Ten title game, and he didn't beat Ohio State, but he did everything else. Purdue, Michigan, almost made the Big Ten title game, like all of it. Yeah.
And even Ohio State fans want a coach who does that. And they've been wanting that, and even Ohio State doesn't have a coach that can do that now, which is insane. Ryan Day can't even deliver on the same level that Curt Cignetti delivered this year.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's wild. It's wild. For IU, you couldn't have drawn up a better end of the season. Indiana's heading the first ever 12-team college football playoff. That's the biggest accomplishment in program history. Purdue didn't want to fire Walters, but they had to because of the beatdown they got. And now key guys on the roster, including multi-generational Purdue family players like the latest Karlaftis brother, are leaving. So it looks really bleak in West Lafayette. They got to hire a new coach who can import like 15 guys the way Cignetti did just to have enough players to compete. Mm-hmm. All right, moving on. We had the 9-3 Illinois Illini 38, the 4-8 Northwestern Wildcats 28. This was really close for a half. Northwestern had a really nice opening 12-play drive. The only negative was that it ended in a field goal, not a touchdown. Illinois took a 7-3 lead on a 30-yard Aiden Laffery run. Then it just got silly. Northwestern was about to score when Jack Louse threw a terrible interception, but then just 2 plays later, Illinois QB Luke Altmaier threw a terrible pick 6 from deep in his own territory. It was a close 14-10 Illinois lead at half, but the second half was a different story. Illinois scored on a 2-play drive, forced a 3-and-out, then scored a touchdown in just 5 plays. At that point, it was 28-10. It was over, and the route was on. Northwestern did briefly cut it to an 8-point Illinois lead, but Louse promptly killed all that momentum with another interception. Illinois tacked on a couple more scores, and that was that. Illinois QB Luke Altmaier finished 10 for 17, 170 yards, 10 yards per attempt, 1 TD and 2 picks. He threw some terrible balls in this game, QBR of 25.9. The offense went through running backs Aiden Laffery and Josh McCray, who both got double-digit carries. Laffery had an absurd 172 yards and 3 touchdowns. That is some explosive running. Top Illinois wide receivers Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin combined for 7 catches for 124 yards, and Bryant had a TD. And Illinois DB Matthew Bailey had 8 tackles and 2 passes defended, so nice day for him. For the Cats, QB Jack Louse finished just 25 for 48 for 287 yards, 6 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, and 2 costly picks, a QBR of 51. So Northwestern won the QBR battle but lost the game. Running back Cam Porter had 53 yards on 4.4 yards per rush. Wide receiver A.J. Henning had a really nice day with 10 catches for 119 yards and a TD. Those are some eye-popping stats, so good for him. Tight end Thomas Gordon had a nice day with 7 grabs for 53 yards and a TD. Northwestern lost a fumble in adding to the 2 picks, and that really hurt their chances. John, what did you think about this one?
This was, it was a close game, and it was entertaining for a while. But the fact is you have a person like Brett Bielema, who much like Kirk Ferentz takes advantage of mistakes, and he did, and he made you pay for them. And then obviously you have a career day with Aiden Lafferty doing what he did, which was also the best I've ever seen him play. I've seen him have spurts where he's looked like this, but today or Saturday was just next level, and he was averaging 14.3 yards per carry. I mean, that's nuts.
Just crazy.
3 touchdowns.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was definitely going off. And again, a valiant effort, but Jack Lausch is not the guy.
He's just not it, man. He's not it.
He's not, and it's really tough, as we've talked about at Northwestern, to find that kind of quarterback. They hit him every once in a while, but it's been a long time. And really, the last
Ben Bryant was really good last year.
Ben Bryant was really good. That's true. But I feel it's always like, I feel like it only hits once every 8 years.
It's been a while.
It's been a little while.
In the 2000s, they always had a good one. So I don't know.
True.
When Pat Fitzgerald abandoned the spread offense and started to go into power football, that's when they stopped recruiting good quarterbacks.
Yep. Yeah. But unusually odd day for Luke Altmaier, though. I was not expecting that for him to look that bad.
He did not play well.
But I think it was probably just a one-off. But overall, I think it was pretty solid. You had amazing stuff happening. Obviously, Pat Bryant had an amazing catch, and
always does.
He does. Yeah. And I think he tied the single-season program touchdown record. So good for him, which is not a surprise. He's a freak.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah. So I don't know, but that's about it, man. I mean, it was a great game. It was very entertaining. I thought it was going to be more lopsided than it was, but it was good to see the Cats fight.
Yeah, they haven't given up on David Braun. They have not.
No, they have not.
So I give that up for them. Bielema, man, we've said it. Silences all the haters with the 9-3 season.
Yep.
Most people didn't have Illinois making a bowl, and while we didn't predict 9 wins, we did predict that Illinois would bounce back and have a good year, and we are both correct about that. Brett Bielema remains perhaps the most underrated coach in the Big Ten.
Yes.
He has he has a chance to win 10 games, and he also made his case on Twitter for why the Illini should be in the college football playoff over Ole Miss.
Yes.
Bielema pointed out their wins are similar, but Illinois' losses are to number 1 Oregon, number 3 Penn State, and a bowl team in 7-5 Minnesota, and that's better than the 3 unranked losses Ole Miss has taken. So I think Bielema makes a great point. Illinois should be ranked a lot higher than they currently are, and if the playoff ends up taking 3 lost teams, they should be heavily in consideration given what they've accomplished against a very tough Big Ten schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And David Braun, man, for Northwestern, he's got to hit it in the transfer portal this offseason. He's got to hit it. He's got to get a quarterback. He's got to get some difference makers. It's a really important offseason for him, I think.
Yeah, totally agree, man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, next up, we had the 7-5 Rutgers Scarlet Knights 41. The 5-7 Michigan State Spartans 14. It was cold in East Lansing, John. There was snow. One team looked like they felt right at home, but it wasn't the home team. It was the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who looked at home absolutely bludgeoning the Michigan State Spartans in this one. Get this stat. Rutgers scored on 8 of its 9 possessions in this game, played in blowing snow and wind chills in the teens. At 4-5, this is the first time since 2014 the Scarlet Knights won 4 Big Ten games. Sparty lost 4 of its last 5 games and failed to earn bowl eligibility for the 3rd consecutive year. Michigan State scored first on a Nate Carter 25-yard TD run, but Rutgers scored just 5 plays later with a 7-yard Kyle Monungai run. This game was over by halftime at 23-7. Rutgers absolutely dominated, and frankly, Michigan State looked like they would rather hit the showers than play football on this particular day, in my opinion. First-year Sparty coach Jonathan Smith said after the game, quote, "We didn't play well enough to earn a win or the chance to continue to play on. It is going to take work to get this to a better place. We've had definite ups and downs. We got to get it going. We got to get better. That starts with the coaches," close quote. For Rutgers, QB Ethan Kaliak-Mass was 13 for 22 for 157 yards, 7.1 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks. So good day for him, but it was all about running back Kyle Monungai, who was the star as usual. 129 yards, 4.2 yards per rush, and a touchdown. Wide receivers Ian Strong and Demir Miller each had 4 grabs and combined for 103 yards. And DB Robert Longerbeam had 4 tackles and a pass defended. It's been a nice career for him, and we wish him well in the NFL next year. John, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, the way it started, I thought it was going to be a slugfest. I thought both teams were going to be running the ball exceptionally well because I saw, K-Ron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter pull off some, pretty impressive runs with, I think it was like a 36-yard run, Lynch-Adams, and then a 26-yard by Nate Carter. And Nate Carter brought it in for a TD, and it looked. I was thinking, okay, it's going to be one of those games where it's just going to be each team trading blows, but obviously that's not the case. Because not only did Rutgers find their ground game, which is normal with Kyle Monangai, but Ethan Kaliakmanis was solid. He really was.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
accurate. He was calm in the pocket. He found his receivers, and he got it. And it was just Rutgers just had the balanced offense, man, where Michigan State just couldn't get it together. Aiden Childs did not do Aiden Childs things as far as like the freaky, cool, awesome stuff. That
Yeah.
did not happen.
No, man. I mean, Michigan State, to be fair, only had 36 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Total, which is just, that's really bad. K-Ron Lynch-Adams had some success, but nobody else really did, other than that one early Nate Carter run. And yeah, man, Aiden Childs, I mean, 13 for 23, 150 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks, a QBR of just 28.3.
Yeah, it was rough.
So not a great day for Mr. Childs. No. Michigan State they didn't want to play, man. They didn't want to play in this game.
They did.
They didn't have any intensity. They were getting whipped and didn't care.
And after that muffed punt that turned into a safety, like that totally deflated all of it. I think they were like, yeah, we just want to go home now. I don't want to be out here. It's too cold. Yeah. It's snowing.
I feel like it's a bad sign that they had a chance to go to a bowl game and they didn't want to play today. Yeah. Like in that game the other day. That seems that like Jonathan Smith, I think he's a good coach, but that's like a big red flag for me. Like, oh man, you had a chance to make a bowl game and you couldn't get your team motivated to play. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this Rutgers team they're not world beaters. They definitely are, I would say, are the better team right now, but I don't think it's like wouldn't have been an impossibility to beat them with the team you're putting on the field. But but also you got to give credit to Greg Schiano. He's a good coach. He clearly wants to continue on that upward trajectory with Rutgers, which he has been doing and quite well at a program and in a place where it's very hard to win. So
very hard.
Congrats to Greg Schiano. I think that's really it's really impressive. You've taken a quarterback as well that was a basket case last year, and you've made him look pretty darn good. So you've got the best out of him, and that's great. So congratulations to Rutgers on finishing their season 7-5 and having another winning record. And
7-5, 4-5 in the Big Ten, not too shabby.
Not too bad at all. No.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, man. Jonathan Smith, I think it's going to be really important that they bounce back and make a bowl next year. Otherwise, I think he's going to be in a lot of pressure going into year 3.
I agree.
All right. Finally, last up, we made it to the last game. We have the 5-7 UCLA Bruins 20, the 6-6 Fresno State Bulldogs 13. This was a close, stressful game for a half. Fresno State was able to generate offense. UCLA could not put the ball in the end zone and had to settle for field goals. Fresno State led 10-6 at the break. It felt like this game was getting away from UCLA. But then Fresno State had a bad kick return to just the 14. Bulldogs went 3 and out. They punted from their own 14, giving UCLA great field position at their own 44. Harden ran the ball twice successfully, once for a touchdown to bookend the 4-play drive, and it was highlighted by a 35-yard completion to tight end Maliki Matavao for UCLA. The game remained close for most of the second half, but UCLA scored a TD with 6 minutes left, which sealed it. Fresno State tacked on a field goal with a minute left, but failed to recover the onside kick, and that was that. UCLA QB Ethan Garbers was 26 for 40 for 289 yards, 7.2 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks for a QBR of 67.2. Running back TJ Harden had just 4 carries for 23 yards. I believe he got dinged up at some point and didn't return. So we wish him well. Hope he's okay. Running back Anthony Arias had 43 yards and 3.3 yards per rush, which is a big drop off from the 5.8 yards per rush Harden was averaging. But the offensive star of the game was tight end Maliki Matavao, who had 8 grabs for 120 yards, 15 yards per catch. He kept the chains moving with big chunks of yardage all day long. Wide receiver Quasi Gilmore also had 6 catches for 54 yards. John, what'd you think about this one?
This was a pretty interesting defensive battle. I really liked how both defenses showed up. They were both really aggressive. There were multiple sacks. I think Fresno State had 3 sacks, and UCLA had 2. But everyone seemingly was like getting into the backfield. And as much as I like Mikey Keene, he just doesn't have the same athleticism that Ethan Garbers does, and obviously not the same. I think ability to see the field and get the ball to the receivers. But Fresno State, man, they're always tough. They're a tough
always.
I know that this is a Big Ten team facing a Mountain West team, but I get nervous when Minnesota plays Fresno State.
Fresno State's tough, man. They're tough. Even without Jeff Tedford, they're still tough.
Absolutely. So this is a good win. I look at this as a good win for UCLA. You definitely saw that these 2 coaches, I think, have a lot in common. Both these head coaches have a ton in common. I think they both really like each other, and there's I think it's just a good way to end the season for UCLA, 5-7. Even though I know it's still not you're not going to be making a bowl game, it still looks a lot better than 4-8. And I think there's things to move on and move forward. And I don't know. I find it a positive. I know it wasn't a blowout, but Ethan Garbers is looking better and better. You're finding a run game. Just like USC, if you can shore up those at the line of scrimmage, I think this could be a dangerous team next year.
Yeah, I agree. They continue to improve throughout the year. Well, the early games were really rough. It's also true that UCLA had an extremely tough schedule.
Yes,
and also Chip Kelly left a lot of holes on the team.
Yep.
So for Deshaun Foster to mold this team and have them get better and win some games down the stretch, I think proves that he's a decent coach.
Yeah.
Which I think was the question. Anytime not picking on him, but anytime you have a first-time head coach, the question is, do they know what they're doing? Is the team going to get better? Because that's how we judge teams, right? Do they get better from the beginning of the year to the end of the year?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And his team got better. So I think, man, there's a lot of positive things going on there. And I think, it'll be interesting to see, where UCLA turns at quarterback for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be somebody on the roster? Will they go back in the transfer portal? What's going to happen? But I'll tell you, man, I was all ready to be like, UCLA is going to bounce back and they're going to start off hot next year. And then I looked at their schedule and, man, the UCLA AD has done the team no favors. Beginning next season with a home game against perennial contender Utah. And Utah has never had 2 bad years in a row. So the Bruins will have a lot of work to do between now and then to be ready for such a big opening game before the gauntlet of a Big Ten schedule. And also, man, UNLV is a very good team, and they're playing them on the road next year. Why in the world, UCLA AD, did you agree to play a road game at UNLV? Man, these people are not helping Deshaun Foster. Help your coach. Help him. What are you doing? You put 3 winnable games on there for him so he can get off to a good start. But you're going to give him 2 games he could lose before you even get to conference play? Man, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's like how Purdue keeps scheduling, let's play Notre Dame and Oregon State. And I'm like, in what sport? Not football. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
John, we made it through all the games.
We did. We made it through a full season.
We made it through a whole season. How exciting is that? And you know what the best part of it is? Minnesota has the axe.
Yeah. And our season isn't actually over yet.
No, it's not. We still have a bowl game.
I mean, I feel bad. All those people sitting on the couch watching other teams play.
It is it's a crummy feeling. We've been there, and it's a crummy feeling. And you're playing your bowl pools with your friends, but your team's not even on it.
Yep,
it's rough.
Yeah, it's painful, man. I feel real bad.
I think you got at times like this. You got to focus on family and the holidays.
That's it.
Watch a lot of Christmas movies.
Mm-hmm.
Take your mind off all that football that your team's not playing.
Yeah.
Oh man, this has been a lot of fun, folks. Thank you so much if you're out there for listening. We love you desperately. Thank you for coming through a whole season with us. We are going to continue into the off season. We will be here. I will do either a solo pod or a pod with a guest to talk about the Big Ten title game this week. And then John and I will probably do one pod to get ready for bowl season and another pod to get ready for the playoff.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. Yep.
So we'll do that. And so you can get ready for that. You can be blah, blah, blah. You can be on the lookout for that. And John, is there anything else you want to say before we get out of here and finish celebrating a rivalry week win of Minnesota over Wisconsin 24-7?
Yes. Well, if you want to find Wheeler for Saturday, find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict. Find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSAT. You can find Mike here at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com. And row the boat, Sky-Yuma, go Gophers. The axe is home. We're going bowling. Heck yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, the axe is back in all its glory in Dinkytown. So if you want to see Paul Bunyan's axe, don't go to Madison because it's not there anymore. Go to Dinkytown, to the Minnesota Football Complex. You can see it there. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we will see you on the next one. Have an awesome start of your week.